What would you do if you were publicly humiliated by the one person who wrecked your life? You're at a dinner surrounded by faces from your past, and your ex-husband's new wife decides to make you her prey. She calls you pathetic. She calls you charity case. In front of everyone, she loudly proclaims, "You're broke." The whole room falls silent, all eyes on you, waiting for you to shatter. But what if you don't? What if instead of tears, you reach into your simple purse and pull out a symbol of power? So exclusive, most people have only ever heard of it in myths. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Naomi Hayes and how she paid a dinner bill that ended a marriage and exposed a lie 6 years in the making. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a gas bill and a catalogue for artisanal pottery. It was printed on thick, cream-coloured cardstock, the kind of paper that felt important even before you read the words. Northwood University Alumni Reunion. Naomi Hayes ran her thumb over the embossed crest, a familiar wave of nostalgia and anxiety washing over her. 10 years. It felt like 100. Her life now was a quiet study in minimalism. She lived in a modest but charming bungalow in a leafy suburb, drove a reliable 5-year-old Honda, and wore clothes from brands like J. Crew and Everlane quality, but understated. Her days were structured and calm. She worked from a home office, consulted for a handful of niche software companies, and spent her evenings gardening or reading. It was a life she had meticulously built for herself, a fortress of peace after the scorched earth demolition of her marriage. Her best friend, Chloe, was having none of her hesitation. "You have to go, Ames," Chloe insisted over the phone, her voice crackling with an energy Naomi hadn't felt in years. "It's our 10-year. We promised we'd go back and laugh about how much we stressed over Professor Albright's history papers." "I don't know, Chloe. Reunions are weird. It's a showcase. Who has the best job, the most kids, the shiniest spouse?" Naomi trailed off the last word, hanging in the air. "Oh, you mean Michael?" Chloe said, her tone shifting from bubbly to protective. "Screw him. And screw Tiffany. You can't let them keep you from living your life. You can't let them think they won." That was the crux of it. Michael Sterling, her college sweetheart, the man she had loved with the fierce, all-consuming passion of youth. The man she had supported through law school, working 2 jobs so he could focus on his studies. The man who 2 years after finally making partner at a prestigious firm had come home and announced he was leaving her for his 24-year-old paralegal, Tiffany. Tiffany was everything Naomi was not, loud, glamorous, and meticulously curated for social media. Her life was an endless scroll of Michelin star dinners, yacht parties in the Mediterranean, and front-row seats at Fashion Week, all funded by Michael's handsome salary. In the 6 years since the divorce, Naomi had been subjected to a constant barrage of their perfect life, seen through the curated lens of Instagram, and recounted with feigned sympathy by mutual acquaintances. The narrative was clear: Michael had upgraded. He had shed his quiet, bookish starter wife for a dazzling trophy. And Naomi. The same acquaintances would whisper about her. "Poor Naomi," they'd say. "She seems to be managing." They saw her simple life not as a choice, but as a consequence. The unfortunate, downsized reality of a woman left behind. "They didn't win," Naomi said softly, more to herself than to Chloe. "There wasn't a game." "Of course there was, and you're still standing." Stronger than ever, Chloe pressed. "Look, I'll be your wing woman. We'll go have a few glasses of ridiculously expensive wine, and if Tiffany even looks at you funny, I'll accidentally spill a full glass of red on her white Balenciaga dress." Naomi laughed a genuine warm sound. "You're terrible. I'm loyal." "So you're going. It's at Aurelia, Saturday night. Pick you up at 7. Chloe hung up before Naomi could protest further. Aurelia. Of course. It was the city's newest, most exclusive restaurant, a place where a single entree cost more than Naomi's weekly grocery bill. It was a stage perfectly set for the kind of social theater Tiffany adored. A part of Naomi dreaded it with every fiber of her being. But another smaller part, the part she had carefully suppressed for 6 years, felt a flicker of something else. Not anger, not a desire for revenge, but a quiet, unyielding sense of resolve. She had spent 6 years being underestimated, pitied, and defined by the man who left her. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to change the narrative. She opened her closet, bypassing the sensible navy blue dress she would normally choose. Her eyes landed on a simple, impeccably tailored black dress she'd bought on a whim and never worn. It was elegant, understated, and timeless. It was perfect. She wouldn't be flashy. She wouldn't be loud. She would just be herself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that would be more than enough. Aurelia was less a restaurant and more a cathedral of modern wealth. Valets in crisp uniforms whisked away cars with silent efficiency. The entrance opened into a cavernous space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a glittering panorama of the city skyline. Soft jazz piano music drifted from an unseen corner, mingling with the low hum of conversation and the clinking of heavy silverware against porcelain. Naomi felt a familiar pang of social anxiety as she and Chloe stepped inside. The room was filled with faces she half recognized, older, softer versions of the students she'd once shared lecture halls with. They were clustered in small, polished groups, their laughter a little too loud, their smiles a little too bright. "Okay." Deep breaths, Chloe whispered, linking her arm through Naomi's. "Remember the mission. Find the bar, acquire wine, and avoid the enemy." The mission failed on its final point almost immediately. As they navigated towards the bar, a voice, sharp and saccharine, cut through the din. "Naomi. Oh my God. I almost didn't recognize you." Naomi turned. There they were, the golden couple holding court near the center of the room. Michael looked prosperous, if a little tired around the eyes. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Naomi's first car. But it was Tiffany who commanded the attention. She was poured into a shimmering rose gold dress that clung to her like a second skin. A diamond necklace, a monstrosity of carat weight, glittered at her throat, and a massive rock on her left hand caught the light with every gesture. "Tiffany," Michael Naomi said, her voice even and calm. "It's been forever," Tiffany chirped, stepping forward to give Naomi an air kiss that never made contact. Her perfume, something pensive and cloying, enveloped Naomi in a cloud. "You look, well, so simple. It's very brave." It was the first jab expertly delivered with a dazzling smile. Naomi just smiled back. "Thank you, Tiffany. You look very shiny." Chloe snorted into her hand. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Good to see you, Ames," he mumbled, avoiding her eyes. "You too, Michael." The old nickname slipped out a ghost from another life. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, guilt maybe, or just awkwardness. Tiffany's hand immediately went to Michael's arm, a possessive gesture. We were just telling everyone about our trip to Monaco for the Grand Prix. It was simply divine. You should really try and get out more, Naomi. Travel a little. It doesn't have to be expensive. I hear Thailand is very affordable for people on a budget. The circle of alumni around them offered polite, strained smiles. They were all watching, listening. This was the show they had come for. The dinner was an excruciating 3-hour performance with Tiffany as the lead actress. Seated at a long table of 20 alumni, Naomi found herself directly across from the couple. She tried to engage with old friends, but every conversation was inevitably hijacked by Tiffany, who seemed to have a sixth sense for any moment she wasn't the center of attention. When someone asked Naomi about her work, she gave a simple, truthful answer. I'm a freelance consultant, mostly back-end systems architecture for small tech firms. Tiffany pounced. Oh, that's so sweet. Like you help people fix their websites. Michael's firm just landed a huge deal with Syntech, the data hosting giant. The bonuses alone are going to be astronomical. We're finally getting the new G-Wagon. She patted Michael's hand. Isn't that right, honey? Michael nodded, a forced smile plastered on his face. It's a big account. Naomi knew of Syntech. They were a major player, but their infrastructure was notoriously outdated. She filed the information away. Throughout the meal, the digs continued. Tiffany complimented Naomi's dress, calling it a classic piece in a tone that suggested it was ancient. She asked loudly if Naomi was still in that little house, then went on a 10-minute monologue about the challenges of redecorating their 6-bedroom mansion. With every boast, with every thinly veiled insult, she would glance around the table, seeking validation, ensuring everyone was witnessing Naomi's public diminishment. Naomi ate her pan-seared scallops and risotto, her expression serene. She refused to take the bait. Inside, a cold, hard knot was forming in her stomach, but on the surface she was a placid lake. Her calmness seemed to infuriate Tiffany more than any rebuttal could. The more Naomi smiled politely, the more desperate Tiffany's attacks became. She was a fighter swinging at smoke. Chloe, seated next to Naomi, was a simmering volcano. Just give me the signal, Ames, she muttered under her breath. The wine is red. Her dress is cream. It's a perfect storm. Not yet. Naomi whispered back, a cryptic smile playing on her lips. The evening's not over yet. She was right. The worst was yet to come. The main courses were cleared away, and the dessert menus were distributed. The conversation had lulled, a comfortable quiet settling over the table as people savored their wine and digested the meal. It was the kind of moment that Tiffany Sterling could not abide. Silence was a vacuum, and she was compelled to fill it with her own voice. You know, she began, her voice ringing out in the relative quiet and causing several people to look up. This has been such a wonderful evening. It's so important to reconnect, and it's just so heartwarming to see everyone doing so well. Her eyes, sharp and predatory, landed squarely on Naomi. Naomi took a slow sip of her water, feeling the weight of that gaze. She knew this was the wind-up for the pitch. I mean, really, Tiffany continued, warming to her subject. It just makes me feel so grateful for everything Michael and I have. We've been so blessed. She held up her left hand, letting the diamond catch the soft ambient light. But I know things aren't easy for everyone. The economy is just brutal, especially for, single women. The term was delivered with a calculated mix of pity and disdain. Several people at the table shifted in their seats. Michael stared intently at a water stain on the tablecloth, his jaw tight. He wouldn't intervene. He never did. That's why Michael and I believe so much in giving back Tiffany, forged on her voice, dripping with faux sincerity. We support so many charities. It's about lifting people up when they're struggling. Naomi met her gaze across the table. She didn't speak. She just waited. Her silence was a canvas, and she was letting Tiffany paint her own ugly masterpiece upon it. The waiter arrived at that moment, a silent, discreet man in a black suit. "Will this be all on one check or separate?" he asked the table. A chorus of separate pleas went up. People began reaching for their wallets and purses. Tiffany saw her opening. This was it, the grand finale of her performance. She raised her hand, a gesture of magnanimous authority. "Actually, darling," she said to the waiter, then turned her brilliant, venomous smile on Naomi. The entire table went quiet, sensing the impending kill. "Don't worry about Naomi's portion. We'll take care of it. Michael, be a dear and give the man your card." The implication was brutally clear, laid bare for everyone to witness. Naomi couldn't afford to be here. She was a charity case. But Tiffany wasn't done. She wanted to twist the knife. "It's really no problem at all, Naomi," she said, her voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Honestly, I feel for you. It must be so hard trying to keep up appearances when you're, you know." She paused for dramatic effect, leaning in slightly. "When you're just flat broke." The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Broke. A collective sharp intake of breath seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with fury. The polite chatter ceased completely. Every single person at that long table and several from the tables nearby froze. Their eyes darted from Tiffany's triumphant, smiling face to Naomi's, expecting to see her crumble. They were waiting for the tears, the stammered denial, the flush of humiliation. Michael finally looked up, his face pale. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. He looked at Naomi, his expression a wretched mix of pity and shame. He was a coward, and in that moment, everyone saw it. But Naomi didn't crumble. She didn't flush. She didn't cry. For a long moment, she simply held Tiffany's gaze. The serene, polite mask she had worn all evening finally fell away. But it wasn't replaced with hurt. It was replaced with something else entirely. A look of calm, absolute, and chilling authority. Then very slowly she smiled. It wasn't a wide smile. It was a small, sharp, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile that signaled the rules of the game had just fundamentally changed. The room remained utterly silent, trapped in the force field of that smile. Tiffany's own triumphant expression began to falter, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. She had expected a victim. She was facing something she didn't recognize. And then Naomi reached for her simple, unassuming leather handbag. The silence in the restaurant was so profound that the soft rasp of the zipper on Naomi's handbag sounded like a thunderclap. Every eye was fixed on her, tracking the simple, deliberate movement of her hand as she reached inside. Michael stared, his mouth slightly agape, a dawning horror on his face. Tiffany's smugness had curdled into confusion. She had fired her most powerful weapon, and the target was still standing seemingly untouched. Naomi's hand emerged from the bag. It wasn't a credit card she held, not at first. It was a simple leather card holder. With a flick of her thumb, she slid one card out. It was black, not the charcoal grey of a premium Visa, or the dark blue of a Sapphire Reserve. It was a deep, matte, bottomless black crafted from anodized titanium. There was no flashy logo, only the subtle ghosted image of a Roman centurion's helmet embossed in the center. It was the American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card. It was a piece of financial folklore, an artifact of the ultra-wealthy, obtainable by invitation only for those who spend and earn on a scale most people can't comprehend. It wasn't just a credit card. It was a key to a world of impossible access and unlimited power. Naomi didn't flourish it. She didn't wave it around. She simply placed it on the table. It didn't make the flimsy plastic clack of a normal card. It made a solid, definitive thud, the sound of heavy metal on polished wood, the sound of authority, the sound of a narrative being violently rewritten. The waiter who had been standing awkwardly to the side saw the card. His professional indifference vanished, replaced by a jolt of electric recognition. His posture straightened. His eyes widened. He had been trained to recognize this symbol, to understand what it meant. "Of course, ma'am," he said, his voice now imbued with a deep, deferential respect he hadn't shown anyone else at the table all night. Before he could reach for it, Naomi held up a hand. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the stunned silence. "Don't worry about separating the checks." She looked around the table, her gaze sweeping over the shocked faces of her former classmates, lingering for a moment on Chloe's look of pure, unadulterated glee, and finally settling back on Tiffany and Michael. "I'll be taking care of the entire table tonight." Another wave of shock rippled through the group. The bill for 20 people at Aurelia with multiple bottles of expensive wine would be astronomical. Thousands of dollars. For someone Tiffany had just declared flat broke, it was an impossible, defiant act. Tiffany's face was a mask of disbelief. Her perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the way her jaw had gone slack. Her brain seemed to be short-circuiting, unable to process the data in front of her. She looked from the black card on the table to Naomi's calm face and back again. Where did you get that?" She stammered the words, barely a whisper. Naomi ignored her completely, her focus on the waiter. "Please add a 30% gratuity for the staff. They've been wonderful." Immediately, Ms. Hayes, the waiter, said, carefully picking up the card as if it were a sacred relic. He scurried away towards the payment terminal, leaving a crater of silence in his wake. The spell was broken. A low murmur erupted around the table. People weren't looking at Tiffany anymore. They were looking at Naomi, their expressions a mixture of awe, confusion, and dawning respect. The woman they had been pitying moments before was suddenly an enigma. The quiet, downsized ex-wife was a phantom. In her place sat a woman of immense hidden power. Michael was as white as a sheet. He stared at Naomi, the woman he had lived with for over a decade, as if seeing her for the first time. The quiet girl who managed their budget, who clipped coupons so they could afford his law school textbooks, who never asked for anything extravagant. He had built his entire identity after their divorce on the idea that he had left her for a better, more prosperous life. He had convinced himself she was struggling, that she needed him, that his choice was justified. That single heavy black card had just demolished the entire foundation of his world. "Naomi, what is this?" he finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Before she could answer, a new figure approached their table. A tall, impeccably dressed man with silver hair and an air of ultimate authority. It was Jean-Pierre Dubois, the general manager of Aurelia, a man notorious for only interacting with the city's most elite clientele. He wasn't looking at Michael or the other alumni. His focus was entirely on Naomi. He approached her with a warm, respectful smile. Ms. Hayes, he said, his French accent smooth as velvet. It is a pleasure to see you again. Everyone froze once more. Again, Dubois leaned in slightly. Mr. Chen sends his sincerest regards. He wanted me to tell you that the migration is complete. The Phoenix Project servers are running at 400% efficiency. He says your architecture is, and I quote, a work of art. The name dropped into the silence like a stone into a still pond, sending ripples of confusion across the entire table. The Phoenix Project. Naomi simply nodded at the manager. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Please send my best to Mr. Chen. Michael's face, already pale, lost its last trace of color. His eyes were wide with a specific professional terror. He knew that name. Everyone in the corporate law and tech world knew that name. Mr. Chen was the reclusive mega-billionaire CEO of a global tech conglomerate. And Michael's firm, the firm where he was a partner, had been spending the last 6 months and millions in resources, desperately and unsuccessfully, trying to land a meeting about a mysterious, game-changing new platform they were launching. A platform called the Phoenix Project. The ride down the elevator from Aurelia's rooftop dining room was a masterclass in suffocating tension. Naomi, Chloe, Michael, and Tiffany were crammed into the small wood-paneled box, the air thick with unspoken words. Chloe was practically vibrating with triumphant energy, a grin plastered on her face. Tiffany stared at her own reflection in the polished brass, her expression a shattered mosaic of fury and humiliation. Michael looked like a man who had just watched his own house burn down. The moment the elevator doors slid open into the private lobby, the fragile peace shattered. What the hell was that? Naomi Michael hissed, grabbing her arm as she made to leave. His grip was surprisingly tight. Naomi stopped and looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his face. Her expression was devoid of emotion. Let go of me, Michael. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. The Phoenix Project. He pressed, his voice strained. Jean-Pierre Dubois knew you. Mr. Chen sends his regards. What is going on? Tiffany finally found her voice, her tone shrill and accusatory. It's a fake. That card has to be a fake. Or you're a sugar baby. That's it, isn't it? You found some old rich man to take care of you. That's the only way someone like you could have something like that. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes blazing. You better shut your mouth right now, you vapid gold-digging parasite, before I... Chloe, it's all right, Naomi said, her voice cutting calmly through the rising tide of anger. She turned her full attention to her ex-husband, the man who had underestimated her for 15 years. You want to know what's going on, Michael? Fine. I'll tell you. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt truly full and cleansing in 6 years. Do you remember my little hobby when we were married? The coding I did late at night after you went to bed. The silly side project with my friend from Stanford, Ben Carter. Michael's brow furrowed in confusion. That online storage thing. You told me you gave that up. I told you I was stepping back to support your career when you made junior partner, she corrected him, her voice cold and precise. I never said I gave it up. I became a silent partner. I designed the entire back-end architecture. The compression algorithms, the security protocols, the server-side scaling solutions. That was all me. That silly little side project was the foundation for what became Archivane Digital Solutions. A flicker of recognition dawned in Michael's eyes. Archivane was a major player in the cloud storage and data security world. They had been acquired 2 years ago in a blockbuster deal. Ben handled the business side, the public face of the company. Naomi continued. I was the ghost in the machine. It was my choice. I didn't want the attention. I just wanted to build things. When Omnicorp bought us out, my 40% equity stake as the founding architect was substantial. Substantial, Tiffany scoffed, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. What's that, a few million? Naomi gave a short, dry laugh. The deal was for $900 million, Tiffany. You can do the math. The number landed in the lobby with the force of a physical blow. Tiffany swayed slightly, her hand going to the wall for support. 900 million. 40% of that was $360 million. It was a sum so vast, so incomprehensible, it broke her brain. The diamond necklace around her throat, the symbol of her supposed superiority, suddenly felt like cheap costume jewelry. Michael looked physically ill. 300. But you drive a Honda. Yes, Naomi said. It's a very reliable car. I don't need a G-Wagon to feel secure, Michael. My security isn't based on what people think of me. It's based on what I've built. She wasn't finished. She let the financial bombshell settle before delivering the killing blow. After the buyout, I was under a strict non-compete clause and a non-disclosure agreement. Both expired 3 months ago. So I started a new venture, a small private consulting firm. I wanted a challenge, so I took on a single, massive client who needed a complete overhaul of their global data infrastructure, a system that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up to be faster, more secure, and infinitely scalable. She paused, letting him connect the dots. Mr. Chen and I were introduced through a mutual acquaintance, she said softly. He was impressed with my work at Archivane. He hired me to be the sole architect for his new platform. He calls it the Phoenix Project. Michael's legs seemed to give way. He stumbled back, his face a mess of dawning comprehension and absolute terror. The deal his firm was chasing. The career-making account he'd been boasting about all night. The project he was supposed to be pitching next week. It wasn't just some corporate entity. It was her. The proposal from your firm, Sterling, Finch and Davenport, is on my desk right now. Naomi stated, her voice flat and professional. I'm the one who reviews the final pitches. I'm the one who advises Mr. Chen on which legal and financial partners to bring on board. I am the final gatekeeper. She let that sink in. His career, his astronomical bonus, his G-Wagon. Tiffany's entire lavish lifestyle, it all rested on a decision that she, and she alone, would make. The woman he had discarded. The woman his wife had just publicly humiliated and called broke. She looked from Michael's ashen face to Tiffany's stunned, horrified expression. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been annihilated. Have a good night, Naomi said, turning to Chloe. I believe you said something about wine. Chloe, speechless for the first time all night, simply nodded, her eyes shining with tears of pride. As they walked towards the exit, leaving Michael and Tiffany frozen in the lobby of Aurelia, Naomi felt the knot in her stomach, the one she'd been carrying for 6 years, finally dissolve completely. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, and the truth had finally set her free. The journey from Aurelia's valet stand to the sterile gated community where Michael and Tiffany lived was a 20-minute descent into a hell of suffocating silence. The interior of the Mercedes S-Class, usually a cocoon of luxury, with its supple leather and ambient lighting, felt like a pressurized tomb. Michael drove with a robotic precision. His eyes fixed on the road, but his mind was replaying the scene in the lobby, the thud of the black card, the deference in Dubois' voice, Naomi's final cutting words on an agonizing loop. Tiffany sat bolted upright in the passenger seat, a statue of incandescent fury. Her gaze was fixed out the window, but she wasn't seeing the manicured lawns and palatial homes of their neighborhood. She was watching a ghost reel of her own social suicide. She saw the faces of the women from her charity committee, the wives of Michael's partners, all the people she had worked so hard to impress. She had spent years cultivating an image of effortless superiority, subtly reminding everyone that she was the upgrade, the dazzling prize Michael had won after discarding his plain starter wife. Tonight, that entire narrative had been incinerated. The number echoed in her head, a deafening, repeating siren. $360 million. It was a sum that rendered her own life, which she had considered the pinnacle of success, a pathetic joke. Her diamond necklace, which she had proudly told everyone was a custom piece, suddenly felt like a lead weight of humiliation around her neck. Her trips to Monaco, her Birkin bags, her boasts about redecorating it, was all child's play, a toddler showing off crayons to a grandmaster artist. She wasn't just outclassed. She had been revealed as a fraud, playing a game whose rules she didn't even understand. Naomi hadn't just been hiding money. She had been hiding an entire universe of power, and she had let Tiffany dance foolishly on its surface until the perfect moment to let her fall through the ice. As they swept through the grand wrought-iron gates, the mansion lit up on cue, its stark white walls and vast glass windows glowing in the darkness. It was a monument to modern wealth, but tonight it looked like a mausoleum. The moment the engine cut off in the 4-car garage, the silence became even more profound, more accusatory. Inside the house was just as cold. Polished concrete floors and minimalist furniture absorbed all sound, creating an unnerving stillness. Tiffany kicked off her Louboutin heels, the sharp clatter echoing through the cavernous foyer. She turned to face Michael. Her eyes narrowed slits of contempt. All this time, she began her voice, a low, dangerous tremor that was far more terrifying than a shriek. For 6 years, you let me believe she was a pathetic nobody. You let me pity her. I didn't let you do anything. Tiff, I thought she was. Michael's voice was frayed, cracking under the immense pressure. He tossed his keys onto a glass console table, the sound jarring. How in God's name was I supposed to know? She was Ames. The woman who tracked our spending on a spreadsheet and thought a splurge was buying organic vegetables. The last I heard, she was doing some freelance IT work from her little house. She told me she sold her shares in that startup with her friend years ago for a few $1,000s. And you just believed her. Tiffany's voice rose, laced with a hysterical disbelief that bordered on madness. You, the sharp lawyer, the man who reads the fine print on everything, didn't bother to do 5 minutes of due diligence on the woman you were married to for a decade. You told me she was probably selling handmade pottery on Etsy. You absolute, categorical fool. And what was I supposed to do? Michael roared back, his composure finally snapping. He was a cornered animal, and he was lashing out. Run a background check on my own ex-wife. Why? Because my new wife needed more ammunition to humiliate her at dinner parties. This is on you too. Did you have to be so vicious? Did you have to call her broke in front of the entire world? You just kept pushing and pushing, poking the bear until it woke up. Well, surprise, it's not a bear, it's a dragon, and it's about to burn our entire lives to the ground. The accusation struck Tiffany with the force of a slap. He was right. Her own insecurity, her relentless need to prove she had won, had engineered this catastrophe. But admitting that was impossible. So this is my fault, she shrieked, tears of rage and desperation welling in her eyes. Your monumental stupidity is my fault. If you had been half the man you pretend to be, you would have known you were married to a genius. But you were too busy being dazzled by a pretty face and a tight dress to notice you were living with the goddamn architect of the internet. The hyperbole hung in the air, underscoring the sheer scale of his oversight. Michael deflated the anger draining out of him to be replaced by a chilling dread. It's worse than you think, he said, his voice hollow. He sank into a severe, uncomfortable-looking white armchair. The Phoenix Project. This SynTech deal was a trial run for me. My managing partner, David Finch, he put me on this personally. He said, Michael, this is the account that makes a career. Land this and your name goes on the letterhead. If we lose it now, after I bragged to him about having an in, I'm not just finished, Tiffany. I'm a laughingstock. My career at this firm in this city is over. Tiffany's world, which had been tilting now, began to free fall. Her life was a delicate ecosystem that depended entirely on the sunlight of Michael's career. Without his income, his prestige, the entire structure would wither and die. The mansion, the cars, the clothes, the very identity she had adopted were all built on a foundation that was about to turn to dust. Then you have to fix it, she commanded, her tone shifting from hysterical to cold and calculating. She was in survival mode. You have to call her, apologize, grovel, remind her of the good times you had. Seduce her if you have to. I don't care what it takes. You will not let that dowdy bookworm take my life away from me. Michael stared at her, a look of profound disgust on his face. Seduce her? Are you insane? Your life. This was never your life, Tiffany. You just married into it. And after you publicly executed her character, you think she's susceptible to a trip down memory lane. My God, the delusion. Then what leverage do we have? She demanded, pacing the floor. Leverage? Michael let out a single harsh bark of a laugh. She is worth more than the entire partnership of my firm combined, and holds my future in the palm of her hand. What possible leverage could we have? The dog. She let me keep the dog. Tiffany. The sheer pathetic absurdity of his own statement silenced them both. That was all that was left of his 15-year relationship with Naomi, a golden retriever. He saw it all with sickening clarity. Now he had traded a partnership with a titan for a transactional arrangement with a beautiful but hollow accessory. He had built himself a gilded key, and the door had just been slammed shut and locked from the outside. Across town, in Chloe's vibrant, slightly messy apartment, the sound of a champagne cork popping echoed off walls covered in art and photographs. Laughter, genuine and liberating, filled the warm space. Her face, Ames. I swear to God, her face, Chloe howled, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye as she poured them both a generous glass. It was like watching a computer try to divide by zero. Just error, system crash. I think her fillers might have actually melted from the sheer shock. Naomi was laughing too, a deep cathartic release of tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 6 years. They had kicked off their shoes and ordered a greasy, glorious pepperoni pizza which now sat on the coffee table. The contrast between this simple, joyful moment and the stiff, performative misery of the dinner at Aurelia was staggering. It really wasn't about her, Chloe Naomi said, taking a sip of the crisp, cold champagne. She was just a symptom. I know, Chloe said, taking a huge bite of pizza. But watching the symptom get its comeuppance was just a spectacular bonus. She swallowed her expression, turning more serious. Okay, for real, though. What happens now? He's going to come crawling, you know that. What are you going to do about the proposal? Naomi looked down into her glass, watching the tiny bubbles stream towards the surface. I'm going to do my job, she said, her voice calm and centered. There's a difference between being rich and being wealthy, Chloe. Tiffany is rich, or she thought she was. It's about having the things, the labels, the status. It's a performance. Being wealthy is about freedom. It's the freedom to not perform. The freedom to drive a Honda because you like it. The freedom to make decisions based on merit, not on emotion or ego. She met her friend's gaze, her eyes clear and certain. My victory tonight wasn't making them look small. It was the realization that they already were. My power isn't in destroying Michael's career. It's in the fact that I can be completely impartial. My happiness is no longer tied to his success or his failure. Giving him the contract or denying it will be a business decision, and it won't change a single thing about my life or how I feel about myself. She picked up a slice of pizza, a relaxed, genuine smile on her face. And the fact that he has to live with that knowledge that his entire future rests on a purely logical decision made by the woman he so profoundly underestimated. That's a justice far more satisfying than any revenge. 1 week later, the elevator at Chen Global Tower ascended with a silent, ruthless efficiency. Inside, Michael Sterling felt like a man being ferried to his own execution. He stood beside his firm's 2 senior partners, David Finch and Marcus Davenport, the air thick with the unspoken tension of a mission already doomed. The sleek, brushed steel walls of the elevator reflected a distorted image of the 3 men, 2 aging lions of the law, and 1 man who looked like their ghost, pale and haunted. Michael hadn't slept in days. His pristine mansion, now echoing with emptiness, had become his prison. Tiffany had left 3 days after the reunion. There was no dramatic fight, no thrown objects, just a cold, pragmatic departure. She had her lawyers send over a list of demands, treating the end of their marriage with the same emotional detachment as a corporate dissolution. Her final words to him had been, "You backed the wrong horse, Michael. I'm just cutting my losses." He was no longer a good investment. He had been forced to tell a half-truth to Finch, the firm's formidable managing partner, the lead architect on the Phoenix project. "It's my ex-wife," he had admitted the words, tasting like ash. "It's complicated, but it could be an advantage." Finch had stared at him, his cold blue eyes missing nothing. "See that it is Sterling. This firm does not tolerate fumbling on a goal line." Now, as the elevator doors slid open on the 80th floor, the goal line felt miles away. The reception area was a vast expanse of white marble and glass, an exercise in minimalist power designed to intimidate. A silent attendant led them down a long, silent hallway to a set of imposing obsidian doors. Naomi was already there. She sat at the far end of a 30-foot conference table that seemed to float in the center of the room. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking, almost dizzying panorama of the city. She wasn't seated like someone waiting for a meeting. She was enthroned, a figure of absolute command, in a tailored charcoal grey suit, her posture radiating a calm and unshakable authority. She looked up as they entered, her expression neutral, professional, and utterly unreadable. "Mr. Finch, Mr. Davenport." "Michael," she greeted them, her voice cool and even, resonating with the quiet acoustics of the room. "Please have a seat. We have a great deal to cover." The senior partners' men, accustomed to commanding any room they entered, seemed momentarily thrown off balance. They had expected someone older, perhaps more outwardly aggressive. Naomi's quiet intensity was something new and far more unnerving. For the next 30 minutes, they presented their pitch. It was a well-oiled, expensive performance. Davenport was smooth and eloquent, while Finch interjected with gravitas. They spoke of their firm's history, their global reach, their unparalleled expertise. Michael's part was to speak on the specifics of liability and intellectual property protection. He delivered his lines competently, but his voice lacked conviction. He felt like an actor playing a role he no longer believed in, painfully aware that the director, judge, and jury was the woman he had once patronizingly called Ames. Naomi listened patiently, her hands steepled before her. She didn't interrupt until they reached a slide titled International Compliance and Data Sovereignty. Davenport was in his element, speaking fluidly about their strategies. "And so our comprehensive framework ensures full compliance with GDPR, the CCPA, and all relevant international data protection regulations." Naomi made her first move. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her tone disarmingly polite. "Your proposal cites the standard GDPR framework, which is of course essential. However, it seems to have overlooked the precedent set by the European Court of Justice in the Schrems II, ruling specifically regarding its implications on transatlantic data transfers for a dynamic multi-tenant cloud architecture like the Phoenix Project. Your proposal relies on standard contractual clauses, which the ruling deemed insufficient on their own. How specifically would you mitigate the very real risk of a potential EU-US data pact collapse, and what supplemental measures would you enact to ensure the data of our European clients remains legally protected from US surveillance requests?" Silence. The question was a laser-guided missile. It was not a general query. It was a deeply technical and legally complex challenge that demonstrated an expertise far beyond that of a typical client. Finch and Davenport exchanged a fleeting, panicked look. They were corporate lawyers, not specialist tech privacy litigators. Their proposal had been a high-level boilerplate overview. Naomi was demanding the source code. Davenport attempted to bluff his way through an answer about encryption and corporate firewalls. Naomi let him finish before calmly dismantling his response, citing 2 other recent obscure legal precedents that rendered his points moot. "Security through encryption is an operational issue, Mr. Davenport," she concluded gently. "I'm asking about the fundamental legal architecture. It appears there's a gap in your strategy." In that moment, Michael Sterling ceased to matter. Naomi's intellectual dominance had been established not just over her ex-husband, but over his entire powerful firm. The rest of the presentation was a ghost. The partners knew they had failed. Michael knew his career was over. When they finished, Naomi offered a polite, professional nod. "Thank you for your time, gentlemen. Your proposal is thorough. We will be in touch with our decision by the end of the week." It was a dismissal, As Finch and Davenport packed their expensive leather briefcases, their faces grim. Finch shot Michael a look of such concentrated fury it could have peeled paint. The message was clear. "You are done." After they walked out, leaving a trail of frigid silence, Michael lingered. "Naomi," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Can I have a minute?" Naomi glanced at the sleek watch on her wrist. "You have 60 seconds, Michael." "I'm sorry." He began, the words rushing out in a torrent of desperation. "For that night, for everything, for the last 10 years of our marriage. I never saw you. I remember you staying up all night, typing away on your laptop, and I would call it your little hobby. I was so arrogant, so blind. I didn't deserve you." "No, you didn't," she agreed, her voice not cruel, but as clear and hard as a diamond. "But not for the reasons you think. It wasn't about the money, Michael. It was about respect. You didn't see a partner. You saw an asset, a comfortable, reliable, low-maintenance asset. And when a shinier asset came along, you liquidated the old one. It was a simple transaction for you." She stood and walked to the vast window, forcing him to look at her powerful silhouette against the sky. "Your firm's proposal is the third one I've reviewed this week. Latham & Watkins offered a more robust global strategy. A boutique firm from Palo Alto presented an innovative approach to tech law that was genuinely forward-thinking. Your proposal was adequate. It was safe. And the Phoenix Project is not about being safe." She turned back to face him, her eyes holding his. "My decision will be based on a single criterion: what is best for this project. It has nothing to do with you or with us. The fact that you thought it might. The fact that you hoped your apology could influence a multi-billion-dollar decision. It proves you still don't understand me at all." He flinched, the truth of her words hitting him. "I heard Tiffany left," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, not with pity but with a detached, analytical finality. Transactional relationships tend to dissolve when the transaction is no longer perceived as favorable. "You should have understood that, Michael." She certainly did. This was the final cut, the clean, precise incision that severed the last thread between them. "My advice to you has nothing to do with this contract," she concluded, walking back towards her seat at the head of the table. "Stop trying to acquire success. Stop thinking of life in terms of trophies and upgrades. Go build something real. It's harder, but it's the only thing that actually lasts. Your 60 seconds are up." Michael stood there for a long moment, a man hollowed out, stripped of his pride, his career, and the illusions he had built his life upon. He gave a single jerky nod, turned, and walked out of the room. The long walk back down the silent hallway and the long elevator ride down from the 80th floor was a descent into a new, humbler reality. 2 weeks later, Naomi sat at her home office desk, a warm mug of tea by her side. She was on a video call with the legal team from the Palo Alto firm, a group of brilliant, energetic minds. They were enthusiastically debating a complex coding escrow agreement, and Naomi was sketching solutions on a digital whiteboard, a look of genuine joy and engagement on her face. This was her element. This was what she loved. She signed the final contract, officially awarding them the partnership. A few minutes later, scrolling through a tech news feed, a small headline caught her eye. "Major restructuring at Sterling, Finch and Davenport. Partner Michael Sterling to depart." She read it, felt a faint, distant echo of a life once lived, and then scrolled on her mind already, back on the next architectural challenge. That evening, as the sun set, Naomi was in her garden. Kneeling in the rich soil, she gently tended to her tomato plants, her hands covered in dirt. She had built a global technological marvel. She had humbled powerful men. She had amassed a fortune. And yet here in the quiet of her own small patch of earth, watching something real and tangible grow, she felt the simple, profound peace of a life she had built from the ground up entirely for herself. She was the architect, and she was finally home. And there you have it. The story of Naomi Hayes is a powerful reminder that the quietest people in the room are often the most powerful. It's a story about building your worth in silence and letting your success make all the noise. True strength isn't about flaunting what you have. It's about knowing deep down what you've built and who you've become. It's a lesson that Tiffany in her shallow world of glitter and Michael in his cowardice had to learn in the most public and devastating way. If this story of quiet triumph and ultimate vindication resonated with you, if you believe in the power of substance over show, then please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own hidden strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice and empowerment. We want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment of Naomi's comeback? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.